DJI's Air 2S. In my opinion, this is a drone with an identity crisis. If you want to know why, stick around. I'll give you my thoughts. Prior to the announcement of the Air 2S, what I would tell my students in class is if they were serious about starting a business, the minimum requirements ought to be a Mavic 2 series, a Phantom 4 Pro series, or above, so that it looks like they're serious about their business. But the release of the Air 2S has kind of blurred those lines. I know the Mavic 3 is coming out shortly in the next couple of weeks, and we'll talk about that later. But for now, let's just concentrate on the Air 2S versus the Mavic 2 Pro. And we'll try to answer the question, is this a consumer drone or a professional drone? So let's look at some of the major categories. First of all, we've got weight. All right, the Air 2S weighs 1.3 pounds. The Mavic 2 Pro weighs 2 pounds. Well, percentage-wise, that's a pretty big increase. But unless you're a backpacker, I don't think that weight differential is really a big deal. Well, what about size? Let's take a look. If we look at the Mavic 2 Pro, we'll see that it's a little longer, has longer blades, bigger motors, and a little wider, whereas the Air 2S is a little narrower, a little shorter, with smaller blades. But is that a big difference? I don't think it is. What about max speed? Well, the Air 2S will do a little over 42 miles an hour. The Mavic 2 Pro will do a little less than 45 miles an hour. So we're talking maybe 2.5 miles an hour difference between the two. Again, not a big difference. What about operating ceiling? In other words, how high it will fly? Well, the Air 2S is rated at 16,400 feet, and I believe the Mavic 2 Pro is something around 19,700 feet. Okay, what does that mean to us? I used to ride snowmobiles out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and there was a place out there called Austin Peak at 11,000 feet. And we used to get on our snowmobiles right up to that 11,000 foot peak, have wine and cheese, and generally just have a good time. Well, if I had taken my drone, this simply means it would still be able to take off at 11,000 feet. So unless you live in Kathmandu or something like that, or maybe you're a mountain climber, these specs will certainly cover anything you may want to do. How about flight time? Well, it's 31 minutes for the Air 2S, and guess what? 31 minutes for the Mavic 2 Pro. How about obstacle avoidance? Well, the Air 2S has 4-way obstacle avoidance. As you can see on the Air 2S, it's got sensors on the front, on the top, those also help facing forward. It's got sensors in the rear, and the top and the bottom. The Mavic has front, rear, top, bottom, and if you open the side leg, you'll see sensors on the side. But how big a deal is that? 4-way sensors are good. You would think 5-way would be better. But on the Mavic 2 Pro, those side sensors only work in certain autonomous modes and don't work all the time. So I don't know that that's that much of an advantage. Okay, let's move on to the camera, the big part. Sensor size, Air 2S, 1 inch. Mavic 2 Pro, sensor size, 1 inch. Identical there. What about video resolution? Well, the Air 2S has 5.4K, and the Mavic 2 Pro has 4K. Well, if you've looked at my previous videos, you know my position on big file sizes. 5.4K is for lazy videographers. Takes up a lot of space on your card, extra editing requirements in your computer. I don't see the need for it. So I think that's a wash right there. One thing that bothers me, I'm by design a photographer and videographer, I like aperture control. The Air 2S does not have aperture control, and the Mavic 2 Pro does. So for me, that's kind of a big deal. Maximum frames per second. In 1080p on the Air 2S, you can get 120 frames per second. Same thing on the Mavic 2 Pro. So if you want to do super slow motion, you've got that option there. How about bit rate? If you want a lot of depth in your data, you do get 150 megabits per second on the Air 2S. where you only get 100 megabits per second on the Mavic 2 Pro. So that's a fairly substantial difference if you're into that. What about zoom capabilities? Well, that's one thing I do like about the Air 2S. It's got an 8 times digital zoom. Now remember, digital zoom, you lose a lot of quality when you zoom in. So it's not good for filming, but what I like about it is I can go up, fly around, pan around, see what I like, zoom in on it, and if I like something, then I can fly to it, drop my resolution back, and take some good pictures. So I think that's a good thing. Now the Mavic 2 Pro, while it doesn't really have zoom, it's got a 2-stage option, one they call field of view and one high quality, which is kind of a zoom in effect. It's kind of fiddly to get to. It does work, but the 8 times zoom on the Air 2S works much better. So that's kind of a plus there. How about range? Air 2S, 7.5 miles. Mavic 2 Pro, 6.2 miles. Okay, once we get the ability to fly beyond visual line of sight, that may make a difference. Right now, it really doesn't. It just ensures we got good quality transmission coming back to us. And I don't see that as a big deal. Here's a big one though. What about third-party apps? Let's say you want to do drone deploy with your drone. Drone deploy only works on the Mavic 2 Pro and does not work on the Air 2S. How about the app? Well, the Air 2S uses the DJI Fly app, whereas the Mavic 2 Pro uses the DJI Go 4 app. I much prefer the Go 4 app, simply because I think it's more flexible, more customizable. I just happen to like it. It may not matter to you. Then the final line item, price. Well, right now you can pick up the Air 2S for $999 without accessories, so less than $1,000. Now the Mavic 2 Pro right now is dropped to about $1,600, but that's becoming more difficult to find because of the Mavic 3 coming out and supply chain issues, so it may be kind of hard to find. And here are a few clips from a recent flight. So where does that leave us? Really, the only two differentiators are, number one, price, $600 difference between the two, and whether or not your client will allow you to fly something like that. So I see two options. One, buy the Air 2S now and save $600, or wait on the Mavic 3, see what it turns out to be, wait for all the firmware updates and all the bugs to be fixed on it, see what the pricing is going to be, how the public likes it, and maybe go for that. So it's really, really hard choice to make between the two, and that's the best advice I can give you. So I hope you're still enjoying these videos. If so, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe down below, and if you feel like sharing with your friends, please do so. That would be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you so much for watching.